Hey guys, how are you? This is Martha Novak. I'm so glad that we're with each other today. I'm sorry we're not having any Blog Talk Radio results this morning. I was waiting for the music to come on and all that kind of thing, but it doesn't seem to be working. So we are going to be going on with Facebook Live, music or not. How are you? I hope you're doing well. This is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak. I am said Martha Novak. And we're talking about now creating the life you want. I think that's such an important subject, and it's the reason that I'm having this come around again, because I've done shows on this many times. The reason it's coming around again is it seems to be that everybody forgets this. They forget that they're creating their own lives. They're writing the script with every thought they think. That's you I'm talking about, by the way. Everything you do, everything you feel, you're writing the script. Now, the interesting thing is if you write the script according to old observations from your past, what appearances told the child you were, well, the end is already written. So to change that end, because many of you recognize old patterns, to change that end, you have to change the script. You have to start thinking new things, feeling new things, doing things you've never done before, and certainly entertaining deeper and more powerful and supportive spiritual thought. Okay? Well, that's what we're talking about today. I see already you all are clicking on. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. Again, I'm very sorry that Blog Talk Radio isn't working. It was odd because that was the only thing that worked last week or 2 weeks ago, and now that doesn't work, and I've got Facebook Live. So I am delighted about that, that we have some means of connection, I guess I want to say. Let's do a little prayer. Let myself get all nice and centered, and then we are going to launch ahead, okay? All right, here we go. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, we thank you so much as we sit here today under the banner of wanting to know more about you, about life, about us. Truly, all the same thing. All the same energy, and we merge with that now that we become full participants here as the people that we are, that Spirit works through. We thank you so much for all the blessings of this life. And even if we don't like our lives right now, by acknowledging that we created it, we have the ability to create something else. Make us aware, dear God. Open our awareness inside. And let us go forward with information we can use today to create the life we want in a substantial, healthy, and happy manner. We thank you so much for this. And to make this so, we ask that we know nothing. We give up knowing nothing. That old ego child's mind of ours thinks we have to know it all. We give it up. In these 90 minutes, we're just listening to the you that we are. We thank you so much for all this, dear God. For the aspect of us known as you. We thank you for this, and we say this prayer in your name, in the name of our love-centered guides and friends, in the name of everyone listening to the show, and so it is. Amen. Okay, kids. Glad you're with us. Hi, Kat. I see you up there in the corner. Pictures come through your cute face. All of this is coming from the book, The Life You Want. This is, hi, Melody. So glad you're with us today, darling. All this is coming from my book, The Life You Want. I think you can get this for a real good price on my website, I believe. The reason I'm even mentioning that is I tried in this book to when I talked about manifestation. This talks about 3 essential. Hi. Thank you, Kat. I missed you too. We've had a lot of company up here lately. That was the reason I wasn't working last week. So it was great fun to see our friends that we don't see very often. And they're safe and we're safe from COVID. So, you know, we had a very good time. And it was almost like old times, right? One of the reasons that I go back to this book as a reference book all the time, and I hope you do too, quite frankly. Even with advanced people, with advanced students, they'll be describing, say, a spiritual awakening or something, and they will be just throwing themselves around. And I said, go back and read the book about what's happening to you right now. I describe it really well. And they go back and they go, oh my God. And it helps you to know what's going on. This book is about 3 aspects. How God really is, at least as much of an understanding as we could possibly have. Who God is, what consciousness is, and how it translates into your day-to-day life. You know, we grow up in a Judeo-Christian tradition or something else with all the wonderful religions that are out there right now. And almost all of them, because they are man-made, have some elements of the insinuation that God is going to punish you. It's there in the good times, but not in the bad. It's going to turn its back on you if you are not a good little boy or girl, and all that I find is ridiculous. I think God is energy. I am that I am, not who I am. You, my dears, are the who. We, in physical form, are the who. So God, if we don't block it, and I'm giving you some, we're talking today about the blocks, about the hindrances to your waking up, to being able to do this in a more easy and effortless manner, you see? So, we have done, I think, up until hindrance number 9. So here we go. We're going to start with hindrance number 9, which is being rigid and thinking rigidly. That certainly stops things. You know, we all have these cognitive biases about how life works, about how the medical, your body works for health and healing, about how, you know, and it's just amazing, I think, sometimes to find out what we don't know. I think being rigid and thinking rigidly is a big mistake of ours. And we're rearing our children in the same tradition. I have a story about that I've used in the book, but I can give you many stories, quite frankly, about this. A man came to me years ago, and he had, I believe it was 3 little kids, and he proudly exclaimed that he was not going to let his children watch television or go to plays or see anything like that. Absolutely not. That was a waste of everyone's time. People had to be academics and had to, well, the interesting thing about that was his first child was like that. His third child might be like that. He was still small. But his middle child wasn't like that at all. His middle child was a creative to the max. And it was interesting because as we went through our relationship together, he and I, we saw that she was absolutely not being served, and she was acting out, doing all sorts of terrible things that she shouldn't have been doing. And I asked him to certainly rethink that, because when I think of, hello, Peter. Well, I'm so glad you've tuned in, darling. It's good to have you with us today. When I think of my own life, darlings, my parents loved the theater, and they particularly loved musical theater. And from the time I could sit on a seat and be reasonably still, they took me to things like that. It was not, and back then everybody could afford it, right? These days, television has kind of replaced some of that. And certainly I was allowed to watch television too. And I was allowed to go to the movies. When a child sits there and sees this and has the right parenting that says we shouldn't shoot people, and all that kind of thing, you sit there and you go, at one point, you go, I'd like to be able to do that. And secondly, you go, at some point later, I can do that. Isn't that healthy? Why not you, right? And so what happens is, I think in good parenting, we really need to expose children to the world and see what they like and dislike. It can't be so much what we like and dislike and what we approve of and don't approve of. Perhaps we should get beyond our prejudices. And the reason I'm starting with our children is because there's part of all of us inside that's still a child. And we need to give ourselves permission for the same thing. Years ago, when I certainly had time to do it, I taught voice. I've been a dialect and dialogue coach, but I also taught singing because I used to be a singer in musical theater. And one of the things I was always fascinated about is the men and women who would come to me and say, I'm tone deaf. That was kind of a popular thing to say. I'm tone deaf at one point in their lives, in all of our lives. And I have never met anybody who's tone deaf. Now, I'm sure there are people out there that are tone deaf, but a smaller percentage, because what happened with all of these people is they never had music in their early childhood home. There's nobody that can teach you how to match pitch. You have to match pitch by listening over and over. It's repetition. You listen, and then you can match pitch. Very few people can't do that, but if you didn't have that experience when you were little, we have to pick it up now. And the same is true of this work. What you didn't get then, we have to get now. Well, that's where the hindrances come from, right? That we are in some way used to making our lives based on the appearances from our childhood. And those things, because our brain was not developed, it was undeveloped. And because we were children, which is a very self-absorbed experience, everything that wasn't quite right, didn't quite fit, all of a sudden was all about us. We were not enough. We were always wrong. We had to work really hard for approval because we and of ourselves were not enough to be approved of. And many, many more things like that. Okay. So here we are. And what I want you to do is see if there's anything you're rigid about. This is where, isn't it, OCD comes from too. We need to have control of something, so we say over clean or over worry because we don't feel we have control. Well, this is somebody that doesn't know that you do have control. You're creating your own life. And it becomes very, very important to wake up and go, wait a minute, I am safe. Wait a minute, I have choices here. Not only do I have choices, I have a myriad of choices that's not just based on what I've always done. You see? But we have to get you ready for that, because if you think this is as easy as that turning on a light switch saying, go, do something you've never done before. Oh, you'll enjoy it. You're not going to do it, right? I wouldn't. So we've got to get ourselves ready to do these things. And that's where sometimes therapy or doing some spiritual work comes in. Guys, long after we leave our parents' homes and we no longer have to meet their standards, we come out of an experience like that either throwing it all away and saying, I have no standards, i.e. no boundaries, no anything, or we take on theirs. And what I'm wanting to put on the table is there is a middle that is you. It's not pinging from what your mother thought and what your father thought and what your mother thought and what your father thought, and embracing or resisting those things that now appear in your life. It's about much more than that. It's about finding your authenticity and who you really are. And there is no authenticity that's OCD. There just isn't. Okay. I want you to know that life has this divine duality. And we often find the things we're looking for in the opposite. For example, the perfection that you would like very much to be, that usually rigid people are striving for, is actually in the imperfection and accepting that we're imperfect and that God is perfect, and allowing ourselves the emotional and spiritual maturity to trust that energy and opening our sensitivity to it and going on and being fine. Okay. Let's talk about hindrance number 10. It is putting all of your energy, all of your attention on the creation rather than the creator. I see this all the time. Sometimes people are content with coming to me and just having their lives feel better. And you know what? I am delighted about that. I'm delighted your life should feel better, as we go along. But don't stop. We're talking about the field of your potential here. Why would you stop just to feel better? It's not going to ultimately make you happy. And if you do stop, remember that our definition of God is an infinite and ever-expanding set of truths, always in motion. So when you stop, when you get stuck, when you fixate around something, you're not going with flow. Flow is an important word here. Flow. There's an image I'd like to talk to you about that explains flow and really all of this ego, child's mind, and everything, and what gets in our way. And then I'll come back to putting all our energy, because I've got stories about that too, on the external instead of keeping it where it belongs, in the spiritual and sacred creation of things, If you'll envision two mountains that a river flows through. At one time, that river, let's say, for our image, is free-flowing and beautiful. But over time, some of these mountains loosen up and great granite boulders come down and clog the river. It's all through little tiny rocks and great big rocks and everything in between. So the river becomes agitated, doesn't it? And the water splashes against these rocks. In certain instances, it forms other tributaries and various things that go off of that. Each one certainly not as powerful as the whole once was, right? Right? Okay. And sometimes it forms little streams, little trickles that totally dry up except for a rainstorm. And then there's enough in the river to have that full. Okay. Now, what I want to put on the table is this. If we're talking about flow, we're talking about the way the river was naturally, but yet all these little tributaries and things that are far lesser have their own little flow. It's just diminished. If we're talking about the hindrances, the blocks to incredible flow, we're talking about all these stones in the way, the big ones all the way down to the little ones. Now, let's name a couple of these stones. Let's call one of them the fear of being rich. And you come to me and you say, I'd like to work on that because I don't want to fear being rich. I'd like to be one of those wealthy people in the world. And I say, great, and we work on it for a few weeks. And all of a sudden that diminishes, and so we can lift that boulder out. You no longer have this fear of being rich. And I say, now, let's look at that other huge boulder down the stream a little bit. It's the fear of being poor. And you say, don't you touch that one. Don't you touch that one. I am afraid of being poor, and I don't want to move that rock because my fear of being poor keeps me from being poor. And I say, bull, that's not true. We have to look at these hindrances as nothing but energy. They're nothing but energy. The fear of being rich, nothing but energy. Lift that off. Let it come back to the present time, which doesn't come back as the fear of being rich. It comes back as creativity. Creativity is one of the pathways to your having wealth, isn't it? New ideas, being in the moment, listening on deeper levels to the God that is the aspect of you. That is true of the fear of being poor boulder. It's just energy. It's energy that's stuck in the fear of being poor. So we have to address that fear. What does it do? I mean, does it make you less of a man that you're poor? Does it make you less of a woman? Are you a big disappointment? We got to find out what that's all about and what you're so blooming afraid of that is kept in place. Because believe it or not, it is being kept in place. And once we find out all those things and what they're made of, we lift that out. Well, you've just lifted two things that are creating more flow. And if you keep going and unearthing these stones that are in your way, you're restoring flow. You're restoring the river back to a very powerful state. Now, that's a real simplistic but very accurate way to describe doing this well. If you are going to create and use the marvelous formula that we talked about in a previous class, remember what it was? Desire plus knowingness that lives in expectation plus action that you are supposed to take, or either from within or follow up on something externally, equals the manifestation of what you want. That works. Why it doesn't work are the stones in the way. And you say, well, I don't even know what stones are in my way. You know, certainly the fear of being rich or the fear of being poor. Yes, I can acknowledge that. But what else is there? And I say, well, that's why you go to somebody that does energy work, because we're supposed to find that out. We're supposed to find that out and remove those stones together, you see. Cognitive therapy helps. All of these kinds of things help. I have always, the difference between what we do here and regular psychiatry, psychology though, is that certainly I want you to feel good and I want you to be healthy and well, but our end is different. It's not just feeling better, is it? It's about opening consciousness, living in the world, and realize what a sacred experience this is, using this energy of the aspect of God we are in all things. Guys, that's what this world needs right now, doesn't it? It does. All right, now going back to hindrance number 10, because I think I'm all over the place today, saying whatever is on my mind. Okay. I actually have a man in mind. I think I wrote about it in the book. That was he was an acting student of mine, and one of the most adorable people I've ever met. He was just fresh and adorable, handsome, dear, very cute. And at one point, he went out to make his fortune in Hollywood. And I don't know, I've kind of lost touch with him, so I hope he's doing all right. But he went out there and he got a big movie right away and did beautifully in this movie. He wasn't the lead, but he had a real substantial, important part. And he was real cute because he was just kind of unafraid and, you know, spontaneous. He didn't know all those Hollywood rules about what you did and what you didn't do. He just went out there with his cute self. Landed this movie well. And it was a big hit. How wonderful. So I went out, and I don't remember how much longer it was, but I went out to see him and some other students of mine back then. And we all had dinner together. And he took me aside, and he was a basket case. And he said that, as usually happens, it happens a lot out in Hollywood. You know, his agent was bought out or something. Anyway, he got dropped along the way by another agency that bought his agency out. And he didn't have an agent. And he was panicked about not working. And I said, well, what are you doing about this? And he said, well, I am doing what everybody else is doing. I'm taking my headshots from agency to agency to agency. I'm doing that all day long. I'm worn out. I'm not having any luck with anything. I can't get anybody to notice me. And I said, well, I think that you were so excited about being a movie star, you forgot that you create all this. And I saw a light bulb go on over his head. And I said, you see, you know, God's creating all this, isn't he? And he's a very spiritual man. And he went, absolutely, I get it. I get it. And I said, so, you know, rethink how you're doing this, because you're just like everybody else the way you're doing it. Why don't you go home and make this a spiritual experience, open to who you are, and see what God tells you ought to do. So he did exactly that. And within a few weeks, I heard from him, I believe I heard from him or from somebody else. What was I think from him? That he had decided to write a screenplay. And sometime after that, within a few months, I heard that he was pitching to, I believe it was Paramount. Now, here's the thing. No new writer pitches to Paramount. And Paramount only takes 18 new projects a year. At least that's the way it used to be. So this was outrageous. This was unheard of. This was very much like this man who would just, you know, spontaneously say, wow, let me tell you, I've got something here. So he pitched to them. They bought it. Now, I don't know whatever happened to this project. I know Steven Soderbergh was supposed to be, if I've got the name right, was supposed to be attached to this. But my point is, for heaven's sakes, we are not supposed to do what everybody else does. If life is the sacred journey that you want to believe it is, and we all want to believe it is, then it's about listening to that. It's about not panicking. It's about staying still within you and seeing what you're supposed to do next. It's about knowing that somebody is just not doing you a favor, that you will be doing them as much of a favor as they do you, that you are a giver and not just a taker. So many people who were actors would come in and audition for me, and all they wanted, they saw me as somebody who could give them a job. Well, that was true on one level. But what about a relationship? What about, creating great work together? What about the fun of collaboration? What about giving to each other? You see? So it's a matter of rethinking a lot of this. I go back to that funny story that I told you earlier. I think, and not today, but a couple of weeks ago, about being in New York with my husband. My husband had never been to New York before, and he was tired. It's the end of the day. He had not had coffee or sugar, which always helps, by the way, about 4 or 5 o'clock, doesn't it? We had walked all the way across town. Our hotel then was all the way across town again. And it was raining, and we couldn't find a cab. You know that story, right? You've seen it in the movies if you haven't experienced it yourself in New York. And I put up my hand, and a cab driver stopped, and I said, "We have to go all the way across town." And he said, "I'm off in 20 minutes. I can't take you all the way across town." And I understood that. That's just fine. You see, it's about, isn't it, finding the right fit. Finding the right fit. If you don't put yourselves out there, sweetheart, how are you going to find the right fit? You have to put yourself out there. So my husband stormed off. Oh, he was really mad about the whole thing. He thought, the guy was dissing us. And I said, for heaven's sakes, he was getting off. We just have to find the right fit. So I put my hand up again. Michael's already around the corner. And this darling Frenchman who was driving a cab stopped. And I told him where we needed to go. And he said, "Sure, hop in." Michael was already gone. I should have hopped in and let him walk back. I did not. I was worried about him. So anyway, he was gone. We ended up walking back in the rain. That was one of our big fights. Because, guys, listen to me. Here's how you can avoid a fight. Darlings, you're just trying to find the right fit. This isn't personal. This isn't about somebody liking you or not. This is not about New Yorkers being mean. This is not about cab drivers being horrible. This isn't about any of that stuff. And I'm just giving you some examples here. Throw all that in the garbage. That's ridiculous. It's about a fit. Who's going your way? This is true in life as you're looking for a job. This is about finding the right fit. You're not some poor, pitiful little victim trying to talk somebody into a job. This is your decision, too. This is a mutual decision. And far too often, what we do is we throw our power away. We hand it over to somebody else. Instead of realizing, wait a minute, I'm in the game, and you are. So don't you forget that. Okay? Now, going back to point number 10, the thing I want you to remember is, if this is going to be a life habit for you, this marvelous spiritual journey that you're on, this ability to create the life you want, using energy, being in God, you cannot let anything externally throw you like this darling man did in LA. You have to have enough worked on inside so you know who you are and that you can stay within that and that you can go forward with your talents, gifts, and abilities, and your communication with who you are as the aspect of God you are, so that you can be on the cutting edge of change. This is extremely important. that you have the ability to do this. And if you throw it all away like he did, now I want you to hear this, because, you know, I work with energy, and energy is where your power is. So he made a killing. Oh, he was so good in this movie, right? And his whole future, he thought, was mapped out. His agencies change. One gets bought out. New agency drops him, and he's devastated. Why? Because he gave all the power, his power, to somebody else. I want you to see this. He gave his power to someone else. Only when he realized again, I had the screenplay in mind for years that I'd really like to write. All of a sudden, it's time. Let's go that route. You see? So it's really important, guys, to keep this whole thing, this spiritual experience. It is. Life is the spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being in physical form, not the other way around. And when you work within the laws that I have presented in another show that are all about energy, you should do real well. If you remove the hindrances, if you remove the blocks that you grew up believing. Now, let's talk about some more of them. Number 11, the 11th hindrance is to creating a wonderful life for yourself is jealousy. Jealousy. We go through life as children and then as adult children thinking everybody has more than we do. We see in our childhood somebody being, somebody having what we think is the ideal mother or the ideal father, and ours aren't so ideal. Or we see people with more money than we had, and we go, gee, I wish we had that money. Anyway, what takes root is kind of this mentality of deprivation, which, by the way, is lack, and which, by the way, is the base of the ego child's mind. And then we define ourselves by that. All of a sudden, we over-identify with that. We over-define ourselves that way. We are deprived. We don't have enough. We don't have what it takes. And it quickly becomes, my family didn't have money, I don't have money, to I'm not enough. It devolves into a self-attack, generally. Along those lines, yours might vary a little bit. The pathology becomes when we don't just say, I have, let's say, lack of money issues. We say, I am poor. When it changes verbs to I am instead of what you have and have not, that's when the work needs to be done, kids. Okay? You can say, but what I believe that's negative like that is true. And I'll say, is it? Suppose you're rich. Suppose you're rich beyond measure. Suppose God has put everything in you to make wonderful money and you're in the way. That's what I believe. I believe that we all have incredible potential in us to take care of ourselves, take care of our families, to be okay no matter what. Well, you got to stop believing the old stuff. One time, years ago, I had a dear man call me, and he had just started with me. And forgive me if he's listening, if I mess up the story, but I remember that he didn't have any money. He had a new baby, new baby, and his car had broken down. And he took the car to the shop, and shop, whatever shop this was. I don't think it was any kind of dealership, but anyway, they kept it for months. Months. Now, he had not done his job either by being on top of them, right? He was the perpetual victim at that time, so he just sat back and waited for them to call about his car, and they never called. So when he finally got around to calling, they said, oh yeah, it's fixed, and it'll be $800. Well, he didn't, and I may be wrong about $800. Could have been $2,000. I really don't remember. Whatever it was, he didn't have it. Let me tell you, he didn't have it. So he called me, and he was in a panic. And he said, oh, I may want this money, and I don't have this money. I'll never get my car again. And I said, okay, you're royally screwed. How does it feel? He was so shocked that I said, you're screwed. I said, or you can believe that there is another solution here, and you need to call the head of that company, and you need to say, you have kept my car an extraordinary amount of time, 4 months, 5 months. You have put me to terrible inconvenience, and now you want this crazy amount of money. What can we do to work this out? Because that isn't right. And it's really, to me, and here's an important word, unacceptable. So he said, I want to believe the latter. I said, well then, put your big boy boots on and go and call them and be nice about it and say, look, there's something needs to be worked out here. And he did, and you know what? The guy who was the head of the whole operation was so horrified they'd kept that car that long that he just wrote the ticket off, and he said, come get your car, you don't owe us anything. That was outrageous that we did that we lost your ticket, that we weren't informed. Okay. Now, guys, if you think all is lost, first of all, it comes from your childhood. And second of all, probably will be. All right? Because there are so many other things out there, so many options. And part of this, when I talk about emotional maturity, I'm really talking about becoming your potential as the authority you are as you. I'm not talking about being dictatorial. I'm not talking about being an asshole. I'm not talking about being a dominatrix. I'm talking about knowing what's acceptable and not, being kind, trying to work it out. He didn't want to, and I didn't want him to take advantage of these other people. But they had to work out a solution. How nice that this other man saw the error and took the responsibility for it. But what was unacceptable was the initial proposition, you see. Okay. So, when we talk about jealousy, and we're talking about feeling deprived, guys, you all just simply must get over this. Nobody is deprived in God. Nobody is. You're blocking a lot of things if you feel deprived. You're still in the child's mind instead of realizing all the beneficence that's here in a different mind, the higher self mind. Okay? So it becomes now, and I can attest to this because, guys, I remember being in an open enrollment class. I was teaching it, and I remember somebody, I think it was a man, who said, this is really easy for you. You came out of the womb that way. But for us, this is hard stuff that you're asking us to do. And he was kind of belligerent about it. It was interesting because it was a time in my life that everything was falling apart. I said, first of all, I haven't been like this all my life. I'm just like this now. My mother's dying, my husband's in trouble, my this, my that. I had a whole long list. It wasn't this husband, by the way. And the class was silent. And finally he said, so you're saying there are no excuses? I said, that's what I'm saying. There are no excuses. There's delay. There's procrastination, that wonderful word. There's fear. There's avoidance. But there are no excuses. Now, in my work, you are allowed to keep doing what you're doing as long as you need to do it. But at one point, you wouldn't want to do that anymore. And you'll do something else. So, while I don't push you to do anything or be anything, I am going to challenge you every time, just like we do here, to tell the truth. You have to know the truth about what you're doing. Okay. So when we feel jealousy for another, there are many, many things that we must work out in ourselves. We just do. We must not begrudge anybody anything. Why? Why do I say that? Because beneficence comes everywhere. You have everything inside of you need, just like they did. If they got there first, so what? Why can't you say, well, I'm so happy for them. If they can do it, I can do it too, because we can all do it. Now that's potential. It absolutely is. But it is well beyond the child's mind. My darlings, we might have ideas stolen. Maybe we should invent better ideas, you see? Maybe we should do something else. Why be jealous? Why go, oh, my life is ruined? It was the masterwork. Well, first of all, there is no masterwork. There isn't any masterwork. Just reinvent. There is the most wonderful book, and I mention it from time to time, that's Viktor Frankl. He wrote The Doctor and the Soul. Oh, such a beautiful book. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning. In Man's Search for Meaning, he's put in one of the concentration camps. He's Jewish. This is during World War II, of course, the Holocaust. And he talks about how hard it was to survive and what he saw there. But one of the things there were two things, he said, that saved him. And one was they took this book away from him when he was put in the camps. And he spent much of his time internally recreating the book so he wouldn't forget it, so he could write it when he survived the experience. That alone gave his life meaning. People that don't have meaning in their lives are really thrown and sometimes don't survive. We have to have meaning. You have to want all those things that you want, and you go, oh, I shouldn't want so much. I don't have the money for this. It's just God saying, go get the money. Go be more creative. Write another book. Paint another picture. Go get a job that you really want for once in your life. Use this talent. Explore this. Take that course. You see? Movement, kids. Mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual movement. Nothing like it. We must be happy for other people. I think it's really important. There is a blessing that comes back when we're genuinely glad for others. Now, most people I know would be genuinely glad for others, but sometimes we have those things mixed with that little child's mind that says, I wish it was me. Or, I should have gotten there first. Or I should have gotten that promotion. I'm better than they are at this or that, right? The reason I'm bringing this up is to say that's an example of how conflicted the emotional body is. Your emotional body, you have 4 bodies, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, that we work with here. The emotional body contains incredible conflict. It contains a lot of feelings of the highest self. I'm genuinely happy for you. But it also contains that little silly, niggling part of us that is the child. It goes, nee. I wish it was me. Has God forgotten me? What about me? Now, what we do here is we take the child's mind, eventually we break it down and take it out of the equation. You'll always have your ego. You'll always have your memories. But wouldn't it be nice just to feel genuinely happy for someone else? It's a loving thing to do. Genuinely able to give people even the benefit of the doubt. Genuinely able to love them enough to let them be who they are. Really. So, jealousy must go. So somebody else gets to an idea before you get to the idea. Why isn't that all right? It is. Create something else. You're an endless resource in God. Perhaps I ought to remind you of that. Hindrance number 12, and we're at the end of that, is having the mentality that we should get, there are 13 of them. Sorry, this is not the last one. Having the mentality that we should get something for nothing. I do have a client, a dear client, who is stuck in this one sometimes. She says, I have done so much. I have worked so hard. God should just give it to me. But what she has never grown out of is her emotional immaturity of wanting the things that a child does. She wants somebody to come along and take care of her. Do you think that's going to happen? I say, nope. Nope. She has worked hard, but she hasn't gotten all of it. And we must be glad that we have more to go and we see what it is and we can get rid of that over time. We have to be confronted with it. We have to say, I don't want to do that again. This woman attracts the same man over and over and over and over again. Isn't that an interesting thing? He's never appropriate. She always has the same pattern. She's thrilled, love, the promise of love, and then it all goes kaflooey within even a few days because she's very aware. Where's her authenticity in that? Where's the nice person that she shows me? That I know, that I love, that all her friends love. When she doesn't want something for nothing. Guys, this is about doing things ourselves. Waking up to be who we are. Putting our values in place. Working within them every time. It's not about getting something for nothing. It's not about being rewarded by Santa Claus or anything else. It's about living our lives in full participation with the energy of God through us in this moment and all others. When I say it's a sacred journey, I don't use that word lightly. It's a sacred experience. When will this very moment come again? It won't. You sitting where you are, standing where you are right now, in your home or in someone else's, you, in those clothes, Michael and I tease, in this underwear. Me talking these very words to you, you thinking thoughts that are exclusively your own right now, feeling feelings running through your body. You see, this will never come again. This moment is so beautiful and so sacred and so special, and we ignore these moments. And that's unconsciousness. And I've said all along that consciousness and enlightenment, the things that we talk about here, are not the daily life most people lead. That's what's in this book too. They're the daily life that most of us miss. And this is why. We don't realize what we've got here until we do. It means so much to me that you listen to a show like this, that reminds you of this, because it's what you already know. I'm just reminding you of what you already know. You get distracted, get confused, you give your power away. Don't. And number 13. This is one of my favorite topics. Ingratitude. Ingratitude. If we are doing nothing but thinking about ourselves, if we are expecting to be jumped on or to not be liked or something like that, if you're expecting the negative, guys, you can't be grateful. So you come to me and you say, I find myself, and I'm embarrassed to say it. This is what people say to me. I'm embarrassed to say it, but I'm not grateful for anything. We have to look other places about why you're not grateful, because let me tell you, gratitude is one of the natural states of the highest self. Gratitude is really important too. You know why? Because it opens flow. And you have to have flow to have the life you want, right? Just like I described earlier. And we can talk about flow more next week. There's also something that I want to talk with you all about. Well, maybe I can go on into it today. Why not? I can talk to you about it today. We have enough time. I thought it was later than it was. If you surrender, if you feel gratitude, it is a surrender of sorts. You're saying, I couldn't have done this alone, to either God, or you say, I couldn't have done this alone, and here was my partner. We know, energetically, that it is about God passing through us all, right? But if you are grateful, it means there's something happening besides you. You're grateful you were inspired. You're grateful somebody else was inspired. You say grateful that somebody was along for the journey to give you support. You are grateful for something else, and you are surrendered. Guys, the three things I talk about in this book are the three things you need to make everything work beautifully. A new idea of who God is, what God is in your life, and a sense of that power as energy. Number 2, being able to manifest absolutely. We talk about it in detail. And number 3 is spiritual surrender. Life is full of little surrenders, but there's a big one ahead of you. A lot of people do this on their deathbed. It's a lot more fun if you will do it now. And that is a spiritual surrender, giving yourself and all you love and everything to God and saying, transform me. Let me know that you are here and alive, a living God in me every moment, and you care about every little inconsequential thing. And that's something that religion sometimes doesn't teach. They say, don't bother God with that. Well, God is that. God is everything. Why wouldn't God be involved in everything? It is essentially everything. Okay? So one of the big things I'm wanting you to realize is that gratitude opens flow. Gratitude is a surrender. A surrender says, there was more than me doing this. There's always more than us doing it, darlings. All those ideas in your head that you think are your own, oh, I just thought of this, I need to do it, is is spirit. There is no us. There's just the resistant part of God's energy in the ego child's mind state, but it's all still God's energy, isn't it? Let's do something else. Okay. So let me see what I want to say now about flow. We've talked about the river, we've talked about the mountains, we've talked about the things along the way. I think that's important, but let's define flow. Flow is defined as God's current of creative energy. Flow is God's current of creative energy. Now, all of you all that, get hung up on language might want to open your minds, because nothing's what it seems in consciousness. For example, creativity is not painting a picture or writing a book or acting on the stage or directing something. No, creativity is an essence inside of you that has very much to do with the highest self and your predilections. You may be creative as a math scholar. Certainly, Einstein was creative. He was a physicist, right? Einstein thought differently, wondered why, played with things. Divine inspiration certainly struck him. So, one of the things I say that my eyes just landed on, I think is really important, is that no one is ever denied flow. You have it inside of you. You just have the ability to stop it with the ego child's mind. That's all. Too easy to do, I might put on the table, by the way. Too easy to do. What stops it? Well, all these little ideas, these erroneous ideas of life and living. And you remember how psychology works, too. At one point, you're going to be very aware, usually in the intermediate to advanced levels of study, that you're making good things bad and bad things good. That's certainly going to stop you, isn't it? How far can you go? We don't want anything to stop you. You have unlimited potential. Wow, that's pretty cool, huh? But you can stop along the way by all these hindrances that we're talking about. You can stop the energy cold. Why would you do that? But we do. And the only way we do stop that is to be aware that that's a pitfall of mine. I do that. You've known people in your life, you may be one of them, that stops and starts and stops and starts and stops and starts and stops and starts. Okay? Well, don't do that. All the answers are right here. Just the fact that you know you're doing that you get afraid. And don't be one of those people, guys, that says, oh, wow, I'm not afraid. Bull. There are only two emotions in the world. Every other emotion falls under these things. Fear and love. So you bet you're afraid. I get real tickled, though, particularly with men. Guys, I don't know what it is with you guys, that macho thing. I'm not afraid. Oh, for God's sake, yes, you are. You've just spent a half an hour telling me about how you're afraid. You worry all the time. You do this or you that. Stop. Guys, just say you are. Because in the acknowledging of that, you own it. And if you own it, you can confront it. And if you can confront it, you can be aware of all the ramifications of it. And you can eventually challenge them all and have them turn into puffs of air and go away. And be something else. But you say, but I don't know what that is. And I'm saying it's God. It's the aspect of God you are. It's the highest self. What do you think you're always left with when I take all this ego, child's mind stuff away? Yeah, the higher self. The world needs you, my dears. It does. Okay. Another thing that stops flow, and we're talking about things that, can possibly stop flow. And one of them is that you look at what others are doing rather than what you're doing. Now, I'm not a real sports person, but I have a good example of this. Years ago, I was real good friends with a man who lived in Canada. I'm still real good friends with him. So if you guys are listening, hey, babies. And he was very interested in the Stanley Cup that year. I think that's hockey. It is hockey. Because Tampa was playing against Calgary. Okay? And he lived in Calgary. Lives in Calgary. So, I got involved in watching this. And what was so interesting is if you watch Energy, you knew that Tampa was going to lose. I think it was Tampa that lost that year. I don't remember what year it was. And I don't know whether it's in the book. I don't even know whether the story's in the book. Anyway, what happened was they started out, they played, I think they do 5 games, is that right? Or 6? They started out being quite equal opponents. But you saw it. I believe it was in the 3rd game. Might have been in the 4th. Tampa started thinking about what the other team was doing and stopping them and not making the goals. And I lost interest. I saw it energetically. You'll see it too if you ever go back and watch those things. You can see it in life. And you go, they lost. And they never got it back. So they lost. Pretty predictable when you see the energy. That's a great example of what I'm talking about right now. Creating the life you want and flow has nothing to do with anybody else. Don't believe in thwarts. Your child, the child's mind inside of you believes in thwarts because that was the only thing that could explain some of your childhood. You were thwarted. Other people stopped you. Maybe they did back then because you were a child, but now you're an adult. There's nothing to stop you. There really isn't anything to stop you. If you're looking for a job, you need to find the right fit. These people don't have power over you unless you're giving it to them. You have power. They have power. Everybody has power. Let's work out a deal, right? This is about fixing what's broken inside you. It can be mended. You can go on and do something else, believe something else, be something else. You know, I love reinvention. Too many people really don't know they can reinvent themselves over and over and over and over again. I think that's a real important thing to do. Learn something new. Reinvent. Keeps us alive, right? One of the things I like so much about many of my friends is that they're all active. They're all painting or they're all learning new things about what I teach. We're all learning together in our advanced courses. We are, we're doing all sorts of things. Michael's building a boat in the basement. How fun. I'm writing books. Other people are making adult creative toys. Michael says, don't say adult toys because that sounds like it's a sex toy. No. But I have this dear friend who just left, who was up here with his wife, who's a brilliant painter, and he makes these incredible toys. He's got this elephant over his mantle, and it's a life-size elephant head, white, paper mache or something. I don't know really what it is, but there's a little wheel over to the side, and when you turn it, the trunk turns and the ears flap. I mean, that's kind of stuff he does. Amazing stuff. Unfortunately, he does not sell his work. But boy, do I love to hear about it, see what his latest creations are. Okay. One of the things that I think is an important word about flow when we're talking about this is change. You have to be at peace with change. I think change is great. I'll even put something else on the table that's going to blow your mind. And I don't want you even working on it in the beginning, but I want you to work up to it. And that is the acceptance of radical change. allowance of radical change. That makes people rattle in the boots most of the time. That's pretty scary stuff. But change is the way God gets you where you're going and where you want to go. Change is good. And you keep in mind that wonderful statement that I'm always going to mess up. Why I can't remember this, the exact quote, I don't know. But it's like everything's going to be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end. That's just the way the energy works. But what we do, because the ego child's mind says we can't have whatever, is you see an evidence of something negative coming by and we shut down and go, see, there's the evidence. I can't have it. And remember, there are only two issues really in the world, right? Remember what they are? You don't care about me and I never get what I want. Those are things that will be core issues that will follow you all the way down. They'll lighten as they go until that moment of surrender where you go, my life is perfect. If I died right now, I would know my life is perfect. Every wasted moment was not wasted. It was alive and full of things that I needed to know. And now I'm here. And I'm not dead physically. And it's time to create something else. Nobody is going to stop you, my dears, in the end, but you. And what stops you in you? The way you think, the way you feel, doing the same things over again, following a pattern that you established when you were a little kid. Do you understand? We can't do that anymore. I often use the image with people that are trying to wake up to what we're talking about right now. That they're standing in a room clutching these few little breadcrumbs in their hands, in their hot little hands, right? They think that's all they have, all they'll ever have, and they live their life accordingly. You can't take those breadcrumbs. I can't open my hand. I have to control. The fact of the matter is, if they just wake up, they'd find they were standing in a bakery. And they have things around them, all around them. It would be marvelous things to have, and they don't have to clutch those breadcrumbs anymore. But they stand there like this until they wake up. There's a basic assumption in life that is just blooming wrong, and that is that people can't change. When I hear someone say that, I know that what they're saying is, I'm not going to change. That's what they're saying. I'm not going to change. Because you bet people can change. You bet. What does it take? These people that want to be straight with themselves and have this spiritual connection, whatever they call it, more than they are afraid. Even though they can still keep their fear until it drops away in the highest self. It takes the fact that they know that change is a marvelous thing, that it's the movement of God. How great. That they welcome it. And they look forward to it. And it takes one other thing that I think is enormously important. And that is, it takes a person's intention. Many times in my practice, I'm simply trying to get someone ready to do something. Right? And, for example, people come to me and want to quit smoking from time to time. And it isn't, in spite of what science says, the addiction to nicotine that's so intense. It's the fact that it relaxes them. It's something they can do for them. It's got an aura of romance to it. It's something to do with their hands. It defines an aspect of them they want to be, you see. There's much more to it. It's a relationship. I had a woman say to me that she smokes because she and her mother used to smoke outside, and while she has great problems with her mother, that was a connection. That was a connection to the mother energy. Nothing's what it seems here, my darling, and nothing is as simplistic as putting a light switch on and off. It is trying to grow out of our fear and accept more of what the other energy is, which is love for ourselves and other people. Human beings, human nature can't be changed. I said in the book, and I think this is worth saying now, that's right. Human nature can't be changed. But then we have to look at what human nature is, and whatever you're saying can't be changed is not human nature. It's not the authentic self. It's part of the old, stubborn, ego child's mind, holding on to that. It's not the truth of yourself. You're much more than that. And because it's not the truth, it can be changed. I'd like to stop there, even though we have 10 more minutes, because what I want to go into next week, is what you need to know to live well, and how you go about knowing those things. Okay? I'm so glad that you were with me today. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you what you can do for me, and so many of you already know this, forgive me for repeating myself, but if you're new to the show, one of the things you can do is to absolutely get the word around about our shows. We appreciate that very much. We really are trying to expand the conscious community here and do our best to do that, and that will really help us. So either by social media or word of mouth. I think on Blog Talk Radio you can actually send shows around. I don't ever have that screen in front of me, so I don't exactly know how to do it. But however you can get the word out about our shows, it would mean a lot. I really appreciate it. There may be other ways, I don't even know. I'm not a very technical person, as many of you have seen. Oh well, I do other things. Guys, I hope you have a very, very good week. Please remember that you can work from the ego child's mind by rote and create a pattern. And every time you use that pattern, by the way, it ingrains and gets more intense and it makes it harder. It's like you're digging a trench, That's why it's so important to do an interrupt on your patterns and do an interrupt on some of the ways you think and feel about life, you see, and to see something else. If you can do that, guys, you write a different script and you have a different end, and that's what we want for you. Please keep yourself well and healthy out there. I'm up here kind of remotely, but I do hear stories about how bad it is in the cities, this virus that's going around. I pray for us all, and I want you to take whatever precautions you think is best. Dear God, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity for all of us being together. We open ourselves now to move on any of this that we think we can move on. We ask that we are instructed by you from within, for that we hear you and acknowledge that what you're telling us to do, that we're not afraid just of the next step and the next, that we may live dynamic lives in the energy of the all there is. This is what we pray. And we say in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and the name of each and every person listening to the show. Thank you so much. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. All right? God bless you. Bye-bye.